Before we get into this, can we just clear up something that this isn't a solemn card? It has nothing to do with the lore, it has nothing to do with the actual card activation, it doesn't even require life points. If we're going to start calling this a solemn card, then we need to categorize everything that's similar to this, like Divine Punishment, like Infernity Barrier, like Ultimate Providence. It's not a solemn card. If it was a solemn card, it would have the Old Man and his 3 forbidden women.
Your turn, Yugi boy.
I know. Someone else talking about this brand new Shutline card, the counter trap that's got the whole community in a bit of a split. But I'm gonna go further than just going, this card does this and this card does this. And I'm gonna talk about the possible impact that this may have on the actual way that we play the game. So if you've been living under a rock, don't have Facebook or anything like that, this card simply states that it is a counter trap, and when a monster or spell trap effect is activated in the same column as this set card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So that basically means that if you don't know what a column is, columns are basically going vertically. You have your spell and trap zone, then you have your monster zone, and then your opponent's monster zone and spell and trap zone. So that is a column. You set it in that, you can activate anything in there. Talking about what I think about the card in playability-wise very quickly, I like it. I think it works. I think it's a decent card. There's something about this card that's really brought out the opposite poles of opinions that people have. Pretty much gone people's opinions, this card's broken and then this card is shit. There are many things that this card actually potentially invokes in the gameplay and in the interaction that the players will have. So if you don't remember, the board positioning was a thing a very, very, very long time ago. I don't remember when, but it was a very long time ago, trust me. They tried to make it work, but really pathetically, in my opinion. It was basically cards that allowed themselves to move from one zone to another, and then they could do certain things. I think like Gabeb or something was one of them, one of the heretics, and then there were other things that could switch way, way, way before that, but they were just awful, and they were pointless, and they didn't really do anything. But this is the first legitimate card that actually does something in, like, you know, zonal marking, let's say. And people are saying, this is the best, like, zone card that has come out. Yeah, no shit. It's because it's the only good one that they've actually put effort into. If more cards like this come out, board positioning is going to matter whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, then you are the exact type of people who should be punished by this card, because it will be your own fault most of the time. The first myth I want to debunk about this is people are saying that this card is so easy to play around. Depending on the deck that this goes into or people throw it into, it may be or it may not. If someone throws this into any deck, like some people claim that it can be because it's an Infernity Barrier for everyone, it's not. Then you probably can play around it if you throw this into a deck that strategy doesn't necessarily rely on back row. You can very easily wait and see where your opponent will set their back row, and then you can play around it. However, if you include this in a deck that strategy includes multiple back row, it's a lot harder for your opponent to actually play around this. If you take one of the best examples that this card can go into, it's Counter Fairy, and if anyone knows Counter Fairy, I like to fucking think I know them. This card is a very good option for Counter Fairy players, simply because you normally load up your back row with at least 3 back row spell or trap cards, normally trap cards, and then normally counter traps. It makes it much harder for your opponent to play around, even if, for example, your opponent has complete knowledge at the fact that you have this card in your hand. For example, you get it off a Pot of Duality. If I shuffle my hand and then set 3 or 4 back row, they're instantly going to start to want to clog up that one column that doesn't have anything in it. Now, this means that you can start forcing the way your opponent plays. You might actually start restricting the amount of cards your opponent wants to activate in that turn for fear of having to hit this. And if you know a Counter Fairy player, and if you've ever played against Counter Fairies, you know that that will not be the only negation cards they have in their arsenal on that board. It starts to get very picky and it starts to get very mind-gamey, and that's why I like it, because I honestly really enjoy the aspect of bluffing your opponent, making them try to do certain things, trying to influence them legally in a certain way in the game states. And this card does it perfectly. I just can't wait to actually get it, load up all my back row and go move. Because it's going to be even more annoying, because at the end of the day, this is a free negate in that type of deck. As I said earlier, if you are only putting 3 of these in a deck that doesn't have back row, you're a moron it won't work. I really like the possibility of what this could invoke in the game. There's something about being able to influence your opponent is really, really cool for me. It also punishes people who actually are too stubborn. People who think, oh, this isn't going to be relevant, so I'm not actually going to bother where I put my cards. I'm just going to put them wherever the hell I want, wherever I can be asked to put it. You're going to be punished. And you're the type of people who deserve to be punished because you're not actually being clever. You're being stupid. You're not paying attention to what your opponent could possibly have, and you deserve to lose. I honestly don't think there's any argument for this card not to have a healthy impact on the game, because it adds that extra layer of complexity that people have been crying out for. Now, whether or not the board positioning and the zonal marking is the correct way to bring in a fresh new mechanic, I don't know. But I actually think it might, because it was always an interesting concept, and a lot of other people have expressed very vocally, especially recently over the past couple of months, I think, or have I really been out that long? I think it was last year, actually. I think Nim might have been one of the people I remember, distinctly remember the video. There's been many more, but I remember him bringing up the idea of it and trying to run with it. And this is just kind of an example of how it could work. And it could work. It very well could. I'd fully embrace this idea. I'm certainly going to get this and play it. And I implore a lot of other people whose deck strategy can support trap cards to also look into it. But do me one favor, don't throw this into every single deck. This card isn't on the level of Solemn Warning. Solemn Warning and Solemn Strike can be put in decks that don't have back row, simply because they are cards that can be activated at any point as long as you can fulfill the life point cost. This is different for reasons I have said earlier. This requires strategy. Solemn Warning and Solemn Strike do not. Now, I'm not saying Solemn Strike and Solemn Warning cards just go up and down the gate, because any good player you're playing against, and if you just do that, they will destroy your resources and actually get through and activate cards that they want unanswered by you. But it is a good card, and I think that it's a nice step forward into seeing what they can actually do with this mechanic. Now, it's obviously not going to be called Shutline in the TCG, and knowing TCG Konami, they'll think of something, you know, totally awesome to come up with. Call it bingo. Just do something like that. You've got a line, call it bingo. There you are. You can have that one for free. Bottom line, this card's good in certain strategies, and it will fuck you up if you don't pay attention to what your opponent's doing.